First off, I want to apologize for last week because the audio was super messed up because my mom was swinging her hands around like it's a
come on,
21-year-old.
Me.
It was 100% you.
Come
There's
on.
video evidence now, Mom. But yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen again. That's why we set up the second table so that when we do touch the table, it won't affect the microphone. So, again, trial and error. But what number are we on? 19, I think. Again, not too much to talk about because everything is all election stuff. Yeah,
election stories.
Now this is I don't want to say one time a year, but I always like hearing whenever election season comes around, Mom's usually right about or she predicts 99% of everything that happens. And she ends up being pretty right.
Yeah, that's not true.
It's fair. It's like a fair statement. So this is like the one time where I'm like, let's see what Mom gets right. But one thing that I think we all are pretty prepared for is the red tidal wave that's coming, which even my friends on the left are like, yeah, it's going to suck for us Democrats. And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to be good. So I don't even know where to start. Again, we have midterm elections coming up. I mean, as most of you who are of age and are following politics, you kind of know how this one's going to lean. The question is, what's going to happen where, who's going to win what? And I kind of want to just let Mom take it away. Where do we start?
Well, this isn't my first rodeo. So to say it's a red tsunami, which is, I agree that that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be, I hope it's a tsunami, but you never know anymore. And it's sad to say that because I personally don't have a lot of confidence in our elections and how they're being conducted. Regardless of past elections that have been controversial, there's a lot of things going on now that are in the news. Judges ruling for and against, people watching drop boxes, not watching drop boxes.
Yeah.
All these mistaken ballots going out, and it's always in what we call battleground states, which are states that matter in these elections. You know, it's never like rinky-dink Kansas. It's always Pennsylvania or Nevada or Arizona.
The ones that need the most change, all of a sudden, they're the ones that...
Or have the most impact in the elections because of their size and their pivotal representatives.
It's funny because I was just talking to someone at the gym about this, and it's funny how the states that everyone goes, hey, was there election fraud there? And then they say, hey, no, there wasn't. And then all of a sudden when you're like, okay, well, we just want to make it a little more secure. Right. And they go, nah, we're not going to do that. Right. That's when you go, man, that's tough. Right. It's tough to go by you.
Well, I'll say this. Hillary Clinton did a video, I think it was this past week, or she was on some news segment. She made a point of saying, and it's laughable in the sense that, keep in mind, this is a lawyer. She was also the president's wife. She was Secretary of State, and she was a senator for the state of New York. Mm-hmm. Was aghast that they were going to allow states to decide elections and how elections are conducted. That is literally what our Constitution says. Yeah. And she does know that, but she's trying to gin up her crowds and her base, the Democrats and the liberals, to say, oh my gosh, we can't allow states to do that. But if you understand the Constitution, that's exactly how it's supposed to be done. Yeah. And that's why we have...
It's always been that way.
It's always been that way, and yes, there have been some tweaking to it with election laws that they talked about after the 2020 election, but predominantly the state legislatures decide how you conduct your elections in your state. It's not supposed to be a federal mandate. The federal government isn't supposed to decide how it's done. Meaning, do you do mail-in ballots? Do you vote beforehand? Do you mail them out? Do you have to come in and do paper? Do you use a machine? All those things are decided by each state individually.
Right.
And where we had problems with the 2020 election, or a lot of questions came along, was because of COVID. A lot of the things that were normally done were changed. But it was never approved by the state legislatures. It was changed by governors, and it was changed by secretaries of states, and they kept coming back to, well, it was a pandemic, it was an emergency. It didn't matter. So by the time a lot of the fraud was before the election, most of the courts said, well, you can't bring a case against something that hasn't happened yet. After the election, the courts would say, well, now it's too late. You should have come beforehand. I'm generalizing because there's a lot of different issues, but that was the big problem. So fortunately, this time, many of us have learned from the past. There's still a lot of oops going on, like I just said. So I'm cautiously optimistic. You're already being told, well, we're not going to know the same day in some of these states, which that's a tell. When they start telling you that, well, what's the delay? Oh, we got to count all the votes. They never had problems counting votes before.
Yeah.
Okay?
So why are there so many problems now?
Right. So basically, because we've increased the voting time, early voting, mail-in ballots, and we still have them in a lot of states, they've created the scenario where they buy time.
Yeah.
Right.
Who knows what they're doing with that time? Again, I don't
Right.
want to say right away.
Yeah.
Election fraud is someone who's. It's just weird how you would think that the times have kind of caught up with the system. And what I mean by that is you would think that by now, after how many elections we've had, this would be a seamless transition from getting votes from one place to another and counting
Yes.
them. For some reason, in the last 2, 3, 4 elections, we still have problems. Now, you're always going to have some level of fraud,
Right.
like whether it's 1,000 votes, which I was saying this to someone the other day. The way that people on the left see it is, 1,000 votes isn't enough to sway an election. And that's absolutely true.
Right.
Whereas conservatives or people on the right would say, well, one falsified vote is a problem in an election that is so important as our presidency.
Right.
So it depends on how you look at it. Of course, again, I don't want to be the podcast that's making claims of, election fraud. But I do want to say that in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of he said, she said, and a lot of evidence to back up that certain people are trying to hide things. And a great example is what you just said, where they say, listen, for the last 20, 30 years, we haven't had any problems, and now in the last 2, we're having some problems, and we don't know why. So I will say that is the one thing as someone who
and the last election was unusual because we had a pandemic. And, the question
amplified
is,
by a president that people are very 50-50 on, so they're going to use that as a scapegoat as well, blame people. So.
Right. It was a very unusual election, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for either party to rig the system.
Exactly.
And that's why, as a citizen, obviously I'm more conservative, but as a citizen, this is an important thing that needs to be fixed because people don't, and it's 54% of the country, if not more, I think the polling was, they don't trust our election.
Yeah.
That's a problem for citizens.
We talk about this all the time, though. You, me, and Dad, and whoever else is here. Where did these polls come from? I hate those polls.
Yeah, I never get polled.
No one's ever
me.
asked me to take a polling question, so I don't know who do I go by on that. Like, do you just grab 5 homeless people off the street and say, "Hey, what do you think?"
But
you
I
know,
even think
wonder
the
where that's
most
from.
ardent defender of the election, when you sit there and give them just some of the basic information that is literally factual of what occurred in the last election, unable to dispute it. Some things are, questionable, your opinion, but there's a lot of facts that need to be investigated. And even they would say, and pause.
I don't know if facts is the right word, just because, if something
Data.
has I would
Data.
say stuff that needs to be looked at just to see what it is. Like, we're not saying that these are right or wrong, but, there's a lot of holes.
Before the last election, there were, I don't remember the number, but a huge number of newly registered Republicans to Democrats, okay? Mm-hmm. But yet a Democratic president won. And that's very unusual. Now, it's data. Could you say, well, that makes no sense? Sure. But it doesn't mean that the president didn't win the election based on that. It's a fluke. It doesn't normally happen. That's the kind of vague stuff that doesn't compute.
I would take it even one further. I think one of the bigger factors was 2 factors. The main one is during COVID, everyone started leaving California. And when they left California to go to Texas, which was the huge thing back 2021 probably, they voted in their own states, which was Texas. They didn't vote in California. Right? Yeah. I believe in most states you have to have a 2-year residency before you can vote in that state.
Each state has their own rule, which is how it's supposed to be.
But if you just moved from California, you can't vote in Texas. But a lot of people did that. Right. And that made Texas questionable.
That happened in Georgia also. Yeah. The same thing in Georgia.
Yeah, Arizona was another one.
Yeah, so certain states, there's a residency requirement, and you have to be there for a certain period of time. But when you have that overlap, right, if it's a 6-month overlap, some people vote in both states. I mean, you could ask a lot of people, even in the state of New Jersey, which is considered a blue state, if you will, not a red state. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have gotten multiple ballots sent to their house for people that don't even live there.
Right.
So all you'd have to do is fill it out and mail it back in. Put a signature on and mail it back in. If nobody bothers to check the signatures, which some states they don't do that, and that's some of the rulings that are coming out now, because now we're ahead of the game, and we know that happened last time.
When we voted last time,
yeah.
Remember, we didn't even have to do signatures. What was the thing that they did? They were like, there was nothing that proved that I was myself. Do you remember that?
No, you had to sign the book. when they gave you the little
Wait,
pencil.
but I remember we were like, how? I
No,
forget
you
what
don't
it
show
was.
ID.
That's
in
what
the
it was.
state
You
of
don't
New
show
Jersey.
ID. So
Right.
I'm just signing, and I guess they just go by a signature, but I don't know.
Well, this is
That's a tough one. I was like, what the hell?
Well, this is your generation have to understand that. We're trying to get a national ID, right? Some states do require it. Delaware, we saw President Biden had to show his ID to vote. In certain states, they require it. Nationally, most Democrats do not want that because they say it's Jim Crow law. It's impeding blacks or minorities because they don't have ID. Well, we don't live in the 1920s or the 1800s anymore. And even the black population and minorities are saying, what are you talking about? We have ID, right?
Yeah.
But they don't want to have that requirement because you can cheat more when you allow just anybody to vote. If you're not checking ID, anybody can walk in. What I find disingenuous is if you don't show ID, how do you stop foreigners from interfering in an election?
Not foreigners, illegal immigrants, right? Foreigners, not so much. Well, you could say foreign.
They're always concerned about Russian interference in our
right.
elections.
That was going to be the second thing that I was going to say, which was why is our election, the actual machines, not even from our country? Right? Aren't there Chinese company that...
Well, it's Dominion is a major one.
Right.
And the software, and I forget the name of it, it's been a while now. But it's supposed to be kept here. And it's not. And the level of, I'll say at a minimum, questionable activity, where these machines are not supposed to be hooked up to the internet, and we've got affidavits from Democrats and Republicans who were poll people at the time, hundreds of them stating the internet was there. We could tap into it with our phones. That's not supposed to happen. Or you had availability. People going in who nobody knows who these people are with flash drives, going into the voting machines and taking the flash drive and walking out.
Right.
Secretaries of states who lost the flash drives in the middle of the night. Think about that. Their one important job is to run the election in an election year for president.
Right. That's why, out of all the things, it's funny that we outsource everything, right, with goods, everything from China, whatever country.
Yeah.
But the one thing we can't make ourselves for some reason is literally the one thing that determines our elections.
And that's why I say this is so important. And there's a lot of people that say, well, move on from 2020. Just forget it. Move on. Let's move forward. Let's clear the slate. Well, you can't.
Yeah.
Because you have to fix it, right?
Right.
So, and that's for both parties. I mean, it worked obviously to a Democratic president's advantage this time. Not so much the downvote, but more so for him. But in general, I mean, even if it was a Republican who won, if there was that much fraud, you have to look into it. You can't allow that to happen. That's how you wind up with inflation and nuclear war and a lot of things that a lot of people have said, I would never have voted for this.
Yeah. Well, I think one of those polls that, again, as I said, I don't know how much you go by, but I saw it was 73% of Democrats said that they would have changed their vote.
Yeah, especially with the Hunter Biden.
It was a crazy
when they
number.
saw the Hunter Biden, they found out about that after the election. Many of them said, if I had known this beforehand.
Yeah, again, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I believe 70 wasn't out of the question.
Right.
So, again, I'm sorry if I'm a little off on that one, but I know it was over 50%.
Yeah, it's a good portion of Democrats who voted for Joe Biden who said, I would have changed my vote had I known this. They should be outraged that they didn't know it. I happen to know it because I was following that news. But they should be outraged. A lot of information that's been coming out, right? We talked about other stuff for amnesty, that people should be outraged that they were not made aware of this information before it came. And that's part of voting too. That's how you vote for legislators who will hold media accountable for fake information or false or misinformation. They're big into misinformation, the media. It's not misinformation, it's selective information. And that's a problem.
Skewed information.
Right.
So, yeah, again, I don't think we'll ever know the answer to what happened in 2020 or whatever, but I do believe that
I disagree.
You think so? You think anything's going to come out?
I absolutely think that there will be special counsels that will be run for Hunter Biden laptop. I think there will be one investigating the FBI, and they've already dropped a 1,000-page letter on the FBI. The Republican Select Committee, if you will, dropped 1,000 pages on what's been going on in the FBI and where we have a problem with how you've been running things, the politicization of it. I think you're going to see an investigation in the DOJ going after parents as terrorists for going to school boards and speaking up and saying these books that are inappropriate and pornographic need to get out of the schools. And there was collusion between the school boards and the DOJ saying you need to tell these parents that they're terrorists. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what happened. And all of a sudden a letter went out. That is absolutely not how you run a democracy.
Right.
That's not how it works. So I think you're going to see a lot of investigations, and they're going to look into what happened in that election.
Do you think, what do you think is going to happen to the Murcielago?
Mar-a-Lago.
Potato.
The Mar-a-Lago
Yeah.
thing?
What do you think is going to end up happening with that?
They've already moved on to now we're going to indict him for something else. I don't know. The DOJ has already said we were going to indict Donald Trump after the midterms. I mean, it's at the time we both talked about that, and I said I really don't care about it.
It's not
I really don't.
I don't think anything's going to come from it. I was talking to a friend the other day. I said, if the DOJ is doing their job, I mean, he's very democratic, but he said the head of the DOJ is kind of doing the right job of not saying anything. I don't know how it works, but basically his job is not saying anything until he can, right?
You talking about Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of DOJ?
Yeah, I believe so.
Is as corrupt as the day is long.
I know,
and yes,
but
I will throw that out there. I don't care.
I mean,
he needs to be investigated.
Yeah, I'm just saying from the perspective of doing his job of, right, you can't say certain things to the public until after the fact. So he gets bombarded with all these questions that he legally can't answer till after the quote-unquote court case and all.
Well, that's what they fall back on. We're not allowed to comment on an ongoing investigation.
Isn't that true, though? You're not supposed to.
Yes, that's true, but they never comment on anything because they just keep an investigation open forever. They never close these investigations. Like, look at the FBI. Didn't we talk about Seth Rich last time?
Was that the one that was supposed to wait 60 years?
66 years before they'll give out that information. That's ridiculous.
Right, they wait forever. That's what they do with JFK.
Right. Well, I mean, if it's an ongoing investigation, it's one thing. If it's classified, like JFK, that investigation ended. It was classified information. And our laws say that after a certain period of time, that classified information can be released at the discretion of the then, I believe it's the president at that time, can release it, which is why Donald Trump had released it. The time had elapsed when it's allowed to be released, and I believe the Kennedy information came out. He signed off on a few things to be released to the public because the time had expired and you're able to do it. And the president at the time decides is it worth putting out or not. That's usually the process. Yeah. And
see, I don't think anything will come of that, the Mar-a-Lago issue. But it kind of sucks because, again, what's going to end up happening, as you said, they're just going to keep it open for a couple years. Everyone's going to forget about it. Trump will probably be done with his second term, and then no one's going to care anymore.
Well, I find it annoying as a taxpayer because we pay for this. We pay for these FBI people to go after a president, a sitting president. Like, I'll say the same thing. I don't want the FBI wasting time going after Barack Obama for the tapes that he took and put in his house, which, by law, if you're going to go after one, you should go after another. I don't want them wasting time going after Bill Clinton for the ones in his, what they say, his sock drawer. He took tapes when he left. It's that part,
it doesn't really affect
They
us
were
that much.
allowed to do that.
It gets so dicey. That's another one that's so dicey to me of how things are taken and not taken. So
it'll go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will throw it out.
Exactly.
Because they're going to say the same thing they said to Barack Obama's case, not to Bill Clinton's case when it started, which allowed Barack Obama to do what he did. It's allowed. The president has the discretion to do it. So they will tie Trump up in court, or his people, if you will. He must have about, 8 or 9 lawsuits going on right now. Most of them defensive lawsuits. Tie him up. He's going to spend a fortune on these lawyers to drag it all the way to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to basically say, we've already ruled on this. It is at the discretion of the President of the United States to choose what he wants to do if he follows certain rules.
Yeah.
So now they're trying to get him a procedure.
Yes. So that's what I was about to say. The procedures were... we already went over this a couple podcasts ago, so I'm not going to go over it again. But basically, in summary, paraphrasing, basically it's like, hey, you can take this out, and then you can have it for 6 months. And then at 3 months, we're going to say, hey, we're going to change the rule and not tell you. And that's essentially what happened. And then they go, oh, you have something that's classified information. Now you're in trouble. Doesn't make sense. It's like coming up with a law halfway through and not telling anyone. Remember, it doesn't make sense. But again, I don't want to be all over that again and go down that road. But that's what I mean. It's either way, we're about to have a red tidal wave because as of right now, people are not happy with I don't want to pin the current president. I'm not someone who pins his. I don't believe that any president has the power to make any decisions without a bunch of people around him also making decisions. So when I say I don't think people are happy with the presidency as a whole, not the person. I mean, I don't think a 78-year-old with that much dementia can do that much damage.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I don't think he has that much power. I don't think the president has as much power.
Well, I don't think people are aware of the executive orders that are coming out of that office. And there's one that I didn't bring the article, and I should have. There's one that he signed. I can't remember the number of it. Nobody's really talked about it. Has been in the news. It's to move us to a digital currency. And I'm not talking crypto.
Yeah, it's its own.
Right. Why do we care? Well, the article I read before I got down here was, how does China use their digital currency?
Right. It's based on
social
social
credit
score.
Yes. When you move everybody onto that system, and then eventually, and they make it sound, the Prime Minister in the UK just talked about this week, we're going to have both. We're going to have the British pound, and we're going to start this new currency. And the central bank, whatever they call it, Bank of London, they're going to monitor it, so we keep it all in one place. And Russell Brand, the actor,
Yeah.
he did a great job of ripping into this guy over this. Sure, let's centralize it. So if we don't like your politics, we'll shut down your piggy bank and you can't get your money.
It's a great idea. I mean, Russell Brand's
That's not a great
guy.
idea. That's
what I mean.
bad
Great
idea.
on Russell's
Russell, yeah. Well,
Russell Brand's an interesting guy.
Yeah, this has been going on for a while now.
That's kind of what I was just saying, though. I don't believe that. You think Biden knows that much about Bitcoin? I can't imagine that he does.
It's not Bitcoin, Chris.
You know what I mean, though.
This
Cryptocurrency.
is a digital. No,
I think someone
it's
around
not crypto. You're missing it.
Mom, hold on. I know what you mean. You mean digital currency. I'm saying I don't think he understands. I bet you there's someone telling him that stuff, comes up with this idea and says, you sign it.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. He's not the one that said, I want to go to digital currency at 78 years old.
He was a senator for how many years before his dementia?
40.
Okay. He never had one policy that worked.
Right.
There was nothing that man did that was really of any value. He voted as a senator, obviously, and he became vice president. But, even as president had a derogatory comment towards him.
Yeah, Obama did.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, though. I don't think that it's necessarily him making these. It's not like Trump, who had certain things thought. I'm sure Trump had a team as well, his cabinet. Mm-hmm. But Trump made a lot more. And part of the reason why people don't like Trump is because he kind of had his ideas and pushed them forward. I don't think that Biden does that. I think he has a team that tells him what to do. They say, sign this, and that's it. And
we know who the team is. It's Barack Obama's old team that just needed a puppet in there. And they could have what they call the Obama's third term. That's what they've referred to Biden's presidency, the Obama third term.
So hold on, let's we can go down this road. It's a long road, but here's my question. We know that, as I said, there's going to be a red tidal wave on Tuesday, right? People, whatever. What happens to the president now? Because the president, I mean, again, he's had everything gets passed because he's had all of our politics have been democratically dominated. Mm-hmm. So what happens now? Basically, everything that the president does is probably just going to get denied.
You have what's called a lame duck session. Do you know what a lame duck is?
Well, lame would be a sick duck, right?
Yeah, you can't get anything done. He's a lame duck. So you become a lame duck very rarely, and it's usually just like Bill Clinton had a similar situation, and it happened to be one of the most successful years of his presidency when he was reined in by a Republican Congress. Okay, so he had to balance, and we had balance. So he wanted to do liberal democratic ideals. He brought it to the table, and you had to negotiate. And the Republicans could not do anything because they were elected to do things, so they had to work with the Democratic president. And that's why I say, as much as a red wave is coming, it's great for me as a conservative because I like many of the candidates and they say the right things for our country. But they have a mandate, means there's expectations of what has to happen when they get into office. And if the president can't get things done, right, because we know it's three branches.
Three
the
branches.
Legislation gets done in Congress, he can sign off or veto it. He can suggest things, but he can't create laws. The laws come from Congress, okay? And if he doesn't like what they do, he has something that presidents have been using, which is being abused to no end, the executive order. So he can just write an executive order and say, well, you don't want to do it? I'm going to write an executive order. That's not how our country's supposed to be run. And that's why I'm saying they're doing a lot of these executive orders behind the scenes, and they're not giving them the attention that the citizens of this country deserve to have. Executive orders were never meant for legislation like this. They were meant for emergency situations. And I'll give you an example. When Trump came into office, if you recall, we still had a terrorist issue, right? Things were not quieted down as quickly. So President Trump looked at the information from the Obama administration that identified countries that had high levels of terrorists coming into our country. So the president, then Trump, did an executive order saying, immediately, we have to stop these individuals coming in.
Right, I remember that.
If you recall, all the liberals were at the airports protesting. He's anti-immigrant. He's anti our country. This is not America, blah, 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 blah. And they fought that executive order all the way to, did it go to the Supreme Court? And eventually they turned it down. Or by the time it happened, we moved on to 8 other impeachments and everything else. Having said that, that's the difference. In my opinion, one of the lamest presidents are the ones that rely on the executive orders because they know they can't get the legislation through.
It's become too easy to do, right? And I think you can kind of. I'm trying to think of who really. I don't think how many did Obama have?
I don't know.
I don't think he had that many in comparison.
You'd be surprised. Like, you don't know a lot of them, which is understood. A lot of them are little tchotchke things that you don't. It's always posted somewhere, but does it get attention? The things like the digital currency, like I was just talking about. They do it as executive order because they know it's not going to pass in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Even a Democratic one.
The idea
they don't want to draw
it
attention.
has a somewhat of a chance if you put the executive order
Right,
on
so they do it quietly before people understand what's going on, and next thing you know, it takes over and becomes, all of a sudden your bank says
think of
digital.
Roe v. Wade, for instance. Like, you don't hear about it until, like, it happens. Like, there's no build-up.
Right.
So that's a great example of kind of the idea of doing an executive order just to pass it through to the point where it goes to Supreme Court, and then all of a sudden we're talking about it.
Right. Well,
Usually it gets stopped.
There was no executive order for that one, other than I think he signed something
I
since
thought there
Roe v.
wasn't.
Wade.
Oh.
No, I think he signed something
I take
since
that
then
back
to use dollars to pay for people to go to other states. I don't even know all the executive orders for that stuff. I will say that's a perfect example. So for other countries, maybe we've talked about this, I don't know. So for England, they have abortion rights in England, but they passed it legislatively. Their parliament passed it. In our country, they knew it would never pass because for our hundreds of years, we've been predominantly a pro-life nation. So they always had to do it through either executive orders or on the state level or whatever. And that's why the landmark case in 1974 was so big, allowing abortion. But it's always been contentious because it was legislated by the Supreme Court. It was never legislated by the people of the country. And that's why it's always been an issue. It's got to go one way or the other. So.
Right. Interesting. But so what do you do? Executive orders, do we just need better rules on the executive order?
It's a vague part of our, I'm not sure executive orders are in the Constitution. I have to look that up. That might have been an offshoot, like something that came out, the Executive Act of blah, 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 blah.
Something probably pretty bad had to happen to have an executive order.
Well,
my guess is, I'm going to take a guess and fact check me on this one, someone. I'm going to go way back. I bet you the executive order started when, do you remember when the White House was originally burned down, back when it was back in New York, and then they moved it? I bet you, who was that?
Was burned down in Washington. Molly,
it's okay, you can bang on the table all you want.
I'm trying to think of her name. Dolly Madison. I believe she's the one that rescued all the portraits, took it out of the White House.
I forget which presidency that was.
Madison.
It was
James Madison. Dolly Madison was the wife.
Was the wife.
I just wanted to see.
What are you looking for?
My book here. Go ahead, keep talking.
I was just saying, that's probably when the executive order happened, because when there was an attack on the White House, that's probably, you had to make some executive decisions at that point as to what needs to be moved fast.
No.
You don't think so?
No, you can edit that out. No.
You can edit that out. I'm just taking a guess here. I'm just winging it. I said fact check for you, but...
Documentary History of the United States. Yeah, this is the kind of books your mother reads.
Yeah. What is this book?
Documentary History of the United States of America.
A documentary history of the United States, expanded in an updated edition by Richard D. Hefner with Alexander Hefner.
I have a little Constitution book somewhere. I don't know where I have it.
Little Constitution book.
Yeah, it's a Constitution.
This is the kind of stuff my mother reads. This is a daily read for my mother. She's read this 6 times in one day.
It's interesting, but I will promise to find that out where executive orders came from. But no, to put it in perspective, so think about it. George Washington became the first president of the United States. Mm-hmm. He started a cabinet. it's not in our Constitution to have a cabinet. There was only like 2 positions, Secretary of State and I think of Defense. But he I have to say, he had a group of people that he needed to advise him. So that became part of the executive branch. So some of these positions evolved over time as our country grew and the needs of our country grew. I don't know what created the executive orders. And that might have to do with things like an executive order to form the FBI.
So, no, executive orders have always been there. Washington actually did one June 8th, 1789. But if I was to guess, it's probably been drastically changed over time because, to your point, it is not actually in the Constitution that's a president's ability.
Yeah, so he set the precedent probably of saying, and I'm sure, especially knowing George Washington, he did it with great constraint. In other words, he debated if we really, really should do it.
It goes to a lot of people beforehand.
Right, because he understood once you start doing these things, and other presidents too, and that is the understanding. That's why we have a legislative body. And, okay, not to get too deep into the weeds, because that's not what the podcast is about, but this is where we're going as a nation. So things like the EPA, you're seeing a lot of cases being brought before the Supreme Court with the EPA, or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. These are organizations that were created legislatively, but they don't have elected officials there.
Right.
And they're determining our lives, in the EPA. The power that the EPA has, they're not elected officials. And in a democracy, if you're going to rule that much over our lives, like the drain water in our backyard, technically that was falling under the EPA. They could tell you if you have a puddle and it has to go away. No, that's not how it's supposed to work in a democracy. They are supposed to answer to an elected official. So if we don't like what comes out of there, as citizens, we can vote that elected official out. And that's been the problem. When the government starts, getting off, not staying in its lane, if you will, we wind up having this enormous government with all these unelected officials running it, and you get things like executive orders being written like crazy. So we need it to be reined in. And traditionally, back to the red wave we started with, traditionally, because Republican conservatives want limited government, small government, and give the power back to the states. Democrats traditionally want centralized government, everything in the federal government, so that they can control and keep it what they feel even and equal for everybody. Well, we have a federalist system. States can decide how their elections are supposed to be. Right. States can decide if they want to have abortion or not. States can decide all these things. And that's, how we're supposed to be done. Certain things at the federal level, but...
This is pretty interesting. So, as I said, George Washington was the first one to do an executive order and, make them known. Mm-hmm. But the first one that was actually, the most important executive order was Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Mm. So that was an executive order.
Okay.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's a good
one.
Pretty
good.
That's one that was thought out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's not... You don't see a president with 40 of these. It seems like each president had maybe one, maybe two. Right. And that's it.
And that's what they were meant for.
Exactly.
For emergency or very unique situations that required not going before Congress and, having it voted on. It was needed. It was necessary at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
It's become a little too, it's too vague and probably has to be readjusted one of these days. But
it's lazy governing because you can't get it passed through Congress. You as a radio personality likes to say, they think there are betters. They know better than we know. So you shouldn't have to vote on it.
That's definitely a Rush Limbaugh.
No, that's not Rush.
Okay, I was going to say.
Modern day Rush. That's one of those things where they know better than you, and we don't need you, voting on this. We'll decide. Well, they're deciding, but they're not even telling you, and they're making it a mandate.
And then when they realize they don't have the power to tell you how to vote, they start skewing information, right?
Right.
To sway your vote.
Right. Or they throw it to an executive order, and they tell the president, if it happens to be the president of their party, that just write an executive order and get around it that way. And if it's something controversial, they won't even tell people, right?
Yeah. It gets thrown on the bus, like this digital currency one.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway. But other than that, I'm trying to think of any other real... I mean, we've gone through pretty much all of the... preliminary debates and stuff, right? Oz, Fetterman.
Yeah, I mean it is what it is at this point. Yeah. It's everybody seems to be neck and neck, and then all of a sudden somebody pulls ahead, and it's we were talking about at dinner about polls. You can't We learned a lot, and I think everybody would agree, of every party after the 2016 election, where every poll said Hillary Clinton was going to win. Everybody said it was going to happen. There was only a handful that said, you might want to wait and see. So sometimes I think it's important for all parties to really look at the polling and not let them tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah,
There's a lot of them out there.
You have to think for yourself. You can't be going by main news, conservative or Democratic. Right. You have to find your own sources. Now, what sources are right and wrong, I do think we are getting to the point where it's a little too hard to tell. And
well, there are a couple that I trust, that I think have been consistent, and they're nonpartisan, and they do a good deep dive into the data.
I wish I could remember the name, but Joe Rogan had, I know we reference him a lot, but he had not a couple, but two people that work together. They have a podcast. He's a Democrat, she's Republican, and they do a very good job at finding the middle ground together. And I wish I knew their name, but I don't.
Young couple or old?
They're not a couple. They're just a podcast together. And I wish they're probably late 30s, early 40s, the two of them. I don't know, but
I might know them,
I wish I knew them. But from what I hear, they're a very great, unbiased, just tell you the facts, which I think is the right way of doing things. But again, where are they getting their facts? That's where you get to those blurred lines. And as someone who's on the internet all the time, it's very easy to get lost in the weeds.
But pollsters, I like the People's Pundit, Rich Paris. I've learned more from him from 2020 and prior to the 2020 election. He's been doing a lot for the midterm election. He does a lot of the background research, which many of them do. I'm not just saying he's the only one. But he gives you the facts in terms of this is how many registered Republicans are in an area. Traditionally, this is how many people would vote Republican. This is why you would see X number of votes in this election. And, he's been pretty spot on. Like I said, there's a few polls like Trafalgar. I like Trafalgar's polls because they're straightforward. They don't seem to favor a party, and they're pretty accurate with their information. But there's a few more that, but there's a lot out there. And to your point, mainstream media ones, where, they're just making this stuff up. I really do think so.
Or they take these polls that are a very small section of people that like we were talking about, and they say 50% of the 10 people we asked is... Right. So I don't know who to go by, and I think we are... I say in the next 10 years... honestly, if this was a blue wave, I think it would get much, much worse. I think because... the beauty of it kind of going back and forth is that it's gotten kind of as far as it can go, because you will always have pushback on one side. Mm-hmm. Once one side has full control, that's when you have a problem. You never want full control, because that's how you get communism.
Well, let me give you an example in real time that has nothing to do with us. So we had an election in Brazil last weekend. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was a very close, like a 1-point election. The socialist candidate, and he calls himself that, so I'm not labeling him, Lula is his name, he claims he won. Bolsonaro was the Democratic Republican candidate, and he did not yet concede, as far as I know. What's interesting is, and this is what we saw sort of in 2020, all the down elections, like 97% were all Bolsonaro's people. Okay?
Really?
So that's a classic example of, and you'll see a lot of pollsters who will say, could it happen? Sure, but it doesn't happen. The numbers don't lie. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes you'll get people say, well, I'm going to balance it out. I'm going to vote for a Democrat for this, and then I'll get a Republican here. Maybe the two of them work together and we'll get a happy medium. Yes, it does happen, but not on a scale like that, where you have numbers like that. And that's similar to what happened to us in 2020. You had so many downvote Republicans that took it in the state, mostly state legislatures, not the federal. And then for the top person in that party not to win just doesn't make sense.
Do you think that, this is kind of a way wild question, but do you think we'll ever get to a 2-president system, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican? Or are you completely against that?
Well, remember, a vice president does not have to be from the same party.
That is true.
It used to be whoever the runner-up was would be the vice president.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. And then that was changed.
Well, if I remember right, the problem with that was the last time it happened, was it Kennedy? Not to go down conspiracies, but Kennedy... hold on, I have to think about this. That didn't exactly happen, but wasn't Kennedy's?
When Kennedy was shot,
Yeah,
Lyndon Johnson
and
became
Lyndon B.
president
Johnson
because he was
is
the vice
the
president.
what's it called? It's like the what's that famous the most maniacal smile or whatever, where they're Lyndon B. Johnson is smiling over.
Oh no, you told me that. I don't.
I forget what it's called. It's like the menacing smile or something, but
He's
it's a weird one. But that's what I
there's
mean.
some issues with his mental stability also for Lyndon B. Johnson.
I think to a certain extent, you always had that fear of your vice president getting rid of you, and I think that was a good.
Oh, now
I think
you're
that was
really
a good
going into
example.
conspiracy
Yeah.
theories there, but yeah,
Well, it has
I've
happened in the
never-
past. I know for a fact that happened with one of our presidents. I couldn't tell you which one, but
Yeah, I've never been as interested in the assassination of John Kennedy. You know, like I've never been somebody who's looked at all the conspiracy theories and everything. Oh, I know. I'm sure it is. And I guess because I find it frustrating that you can't, some things you'll just never know. Or it's buried somewhere and we're not going to get the information we need, right? So you always got to have that gray area, even though it looks a certain way and blah, blah, blah. Just because, you know, somebody saw a picture of Lyndon B. Johnson with an evil smile. Who knows?
yeah, maybe a funny joke was said. Who knows? But it's a weird photo.
I'm sure it's inappropriate on many levels if that's what you're telling me, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff there that we don't know about.
Oh,
and
yeah.
maybe somewhere out there there's information that'll come out, you know.
Just like with this Pelosi thing that's going on right now. I don't know if you want to go through that, but yeah, that's
Embarrassing.
another one we'll never know the story to. But yeah, you got anything you want to talk about? Anything specific before we move on?
Specifically about the election stuff?
Not
Or
election,
just in
but I
general?
know you had some stuff like Herschel Walker, and I just quickly looked through your emails
Oh,
and stuff.
yeah, I know that just bothers me because we had talked about hypocrisy, right? At the last time, you know, it's one thing to have an opinion about something, and that's fine, but does it work both ways, right? Mm-hmm. What were we talking about within that context? Something was going on. Was it?
Anti-racist professor
Anyhow.
calls Herschel Walker subliterate, uses racial slur. What was the
Yes.
racial slur?
He called him
Wow.
subliterate.
Subliterate's not racial, but is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big one.
right. So
I might have to bleep that.
yeah.
I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah, and I find what's really, really, I don't even have the article. I didn't save it.
I have it.
What's really, really disturbing, he's a black professor. Okay? Now, it's wrong for anybody to say that when writing about another individual. But for somebody who calls himself, and by the way, he calls himself an anti-racist professor.
Now, is that one of those, it's only racist if white people do it, or?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wrong if anybody says it. I mean, it's an inappropriate thing to say. He's not quoting somebody else. He's using that term himself.
That's on him.
Okay? And by the way, who's
This guy
he?
teaches children.
Yeah.
This
He's
guy-
I think
yeah,
he's a university
oh,
professor. I'm not even
God.
sure his whole story. And he's getting some backlash for it, which deservedly so, because you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and say, well, I can say these things because I'm a certain skin color about somebody else who's a certain skin color and think that that's appropriate.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, there's no justifying that one.
Yeah. And by the way, Herschel Walker is, as we speak, leading in the polls.
Yeah.
So I guess the people of Georgia don't find him and subliterate and incompetent. Okay?
Yeah.
Enough of them are sort of find him competent enough to put him ahead in the polls.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Talking bad about someone, like subliterate isn't racist, but the other word, that's the one that really slaps. Subliterate just means someone that can't read.
I agree with you, but when you say that these days about a minority, it's taken as racist.
Yeah.
We can debate
yeah,
if it
that's-
should
that's
be
a
or not,
different- yeah.
but that's the world we live in. And again, if it was a white author, all hell would break loose if they said something like that. A black professor saying it, all hell should break loose for saying something like that.
That to me should be. I mean, that's fireable, right? Has to be.
He's not getting fired.
Should be though, especially if
They're
you're
not
going to
getting fired.
fire Jordan Peterson.
They're gonna laud this individual like he's the greatest thinker of all time
What an idiot! Yeah, I hate people like that.
because they want Senator Warnock to get reelected again, who, by the way, is no piece of work. That has nothing to do with his skin color. But that's for the people of Georgia to decide. And I just think when you take it to that level and you're making those kind of comments, where does it end? With the one side says one thing and the other is getting...
I saw a video of Herschel Walker oh man, this sucked to watch, but he was someone asked him, even your son says that you wouldn't make a great leader. What do you say to that? And I was like, shit, can you imagine if your son said, it sounds like his son has some issues, but he was like, well, I love my son so much that I'm going to run to make his life better or something like that. And I was like, oh God, can you imagine if your kid didn't have faith in you like that? Yeah. I think it's here's my, not guess, but when you're a professional football player, at the time, I believe, I think the idea of him being there all the time because of practice and stuff, I believe there's a little animosity from his son there. So I kind of get it in that regard. That's the perfect example of money doesn't fix the problems in a family always. So I was at that one. I mean, I don't have kids, but that would have broke me. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a strong man on a different level.
Yeah, it happens to a lot of people on both sides, right?
Yeah.
And these politicians, you expect them to have a certain lifestyle if you're going to be running for office in our country, right? And somebody did a whole write-up about what the Senate, when you look at our forefathers, what they wrote about what a senator is supposed to be. A senator is supposed to be almost more educated, because remember, this was at a time when people didn't go to school, when our country's starting out. More educated, more well-versed, like the Renaissance man, because women didn't do it by then. And they were at a higher level. And that's why they served for a longer period of time. A representative was the masses. It was the everyday guy who had a voice in our government. But it wasn't anybody necessarily educated.
I always wonder with presidents way back when, say you had a certain number of candidates, I want to know how you voted based on information, because it took months to get information from the South to the North.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So how do you know your candidates and how do you know them well, right?
Well, it was different times, but also people had basic needs back then, right? You didn't have to worry about mainstream media. There were 2 newspapers in the country. Yeah. You didn't have to worry about, what went on in the classrooms because it was a little schoolhouse down the street. You knew exactly what was going on there. You hired the teacher as the town. You knew the priest in your town or your pastor.
Right.
So it was a different world when the country started out. It didn't move at that high a pace. And, our foreign policy was we don't want another war with England. That was like
that was really it.
All of it. Let's stay out of any war overseas and really just build our country.
Right.
Industry. And, unfortunately, that's where the slave trade came in and played its role and helped to build our country and make money for the country, the South and the North, and then eventually industrialization. And that's how we became superpowers, right? Because capitalism was allowed to flourish in this nation.
Back when presidents would think things out super thoroughly. Yeah. I mean, that's a great example. I mean, in comparison to our last 10 presidents, I mean, they had to look ahead 50 plus years.
Yeah.
Our presidents don't do that nowadays. It's
every man for himself. It's becoming every man for himself.
Yeah, it's become. I mean, the real issue is now we have what's almost like a unspoken civil war where 2 sides are pitted against each other. Back then, it was 2 sides working together. Right. Fortunately, we don't have that anymore, and that's because we have politicians in there that have been in there for 40 years who've.
Actually, the bigger issue is we don't have 2 parties. We have a uniparty, and we're seeing that with this election. There is no distinction between the Republicans and the Democrats. But now you have, and they get labeled the MAGA candidates, okay? So that's why even Republicans are against MAGA candidates. Okay, so if...
I'm very confused here. When you say uniparty...
Uni is one.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the problem with our country that we've been seeing in the last, say, definitely since the 2020 election, but even a little bit before that, 2016 and going back. You have groups of politicians in this country that they side more often with the Democrats than they do, and the Republicans, than they do with their own party. They're the uniparty. So they're actively working against some Republican candidates. I'll give you an example. Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. She's the Republican representative in Alaska. She got the seat after her father died. She's been in there for many, many years. She constantly votes for everything Joe Biden wants. She voted to impeach the Republican president before, which you're not supposed to do that as a Republican unless you really, really think it's there. And now she's actively supporting the Democratic candidate against the Republican candidates in Alaska for the House.
Wouldn't that
She's
make
the
her a Democrat?
That's the uniparty.
Right, so you're a Democrat who's labeled a Republican on paper.
Well, you get a lot of perks with that, but that's what's been going on. And as we've watched things progress, there's no distinction anymore between, they call them rhinos, Republican in name only.
Yes, but I think you're talking labels and whatever. I mean, from the perspective of the people, right? If any person who sees that lady and is identifying and picking all the stuff on the left, I would say, yeah, you're labeled a Republican, but you're a Democrat.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how Liz Cheney got censured by the state of Wyoming, because she was doing everything that the people of Wyoming, the Republican Party, because she's a Republican, was against. So prior to, long before the midterms, they censured her. The Republicans in that state got together, the delegates, and they issued a statement basically telling her, you are not representing the Republican Party of this state. She's a member of the uniparty, meaning she's actively said, I'll do whatever I take right now to get the Democrats elected.
Yeah.
So there's no distinction. And the problem is, we see this problem with the leaders of our party, Mitch McConnell. He's the minority leader in the Senate because he's the Republican, right?
Right.
And things he's been doing for 20 years now, and then some, beginning people were scratching your heads. Now he doesn't hide it anymore. He doesn't give money to certain candidates because he wants the Democrat to win. That's a uniparty. So they are actively working with the head of the Democratic Party to make sure that a certain ideology remains in Congress.
Now, if you're voting for one thing every now and then that you kind of agree with the left on,
right,
that's different than voting on everything that... Otherwise, you're just not Republican.
Right.
You can't label yourself a Republican. It's not necessarily a bad thing if you agree with a certain side, but you can't be labeled as something you're not and ride the wave of that.
Right.
So,
but that's how you see people's true colors. So they go in and they say everything that the majority of the people in their state want to hear. I want small government. I'm going to, take on the bad guys and the Democrats, and I'm going to lower your taxes. They get elected, and then they change.
Can I play devil's advocate on you, though? Trump used to be a Democrat until he started running. Would you consider that kind of the same thing? Or is it because he didn't... he relabeled himself, so it's not the same thing. Right?
Well, again, like you said before, you may disagree on one or two policies. That's different. When you're consistently working with the other side and they call it, well, I'm being bipartisan, that's great. How come you never do anything for the conservatives?
Right, then you're not bipartisan. You're picking a different side. Yeah.
Right.
But this kind of goes to my overall...
for your audience, very rarely do you see that in the Democratic Party. They toe the line. So we notice like a lot of border Democratic representatives who have seen the influx of illegal immigration over the last
Tulsi
year.
Gabbard. Tulsi's a good example.
They've been quietly saying to the president, because they know you toe the line. You don't speak out again. They would never have a MAGA on the Democratic side.
Him, right? Again, Tulsi Gabbard went in as she's been the Democratic Hawaiian leader congresswoman for so long. And then she tried running for president. She would have made a great president, and she wasn't Democratic enough, so they got rid of her. They said, no, you're not going to get through the primaries. Now she changes sides because she decides, she's like, yeah, I can't.
I don't think did she change? I can't remember. Did she become a Republican?
Yeah, as of like 2 weeks ago, she converted over.
That's right.
And they labeled her a Nazi right off the a Russian spy.
Right.
So that kind of gives you an idea of how hard it is how one-sided you have to be in your ideas to get anywhere in the Democratic Party.
Well, yes, and you had a group of them called the Squad that tried to take it even further left, and they attempted to rein them in. And they did a pretty good job of it because the Democrats knew you can't go that crazy. Now, gradually, the party has gone crazier and crazier, and that's not me saying it. That's moderate Democrats who, behind the scenes, are saying there's going to be a red wave come the midterms. They knew it.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it. They're border people, and they were saying, you got to stop this border stuff. We're not going to get reelected, and that's exactly what's happening. A lot of the border candidates, the Democrats, they're going to be beaten by Republicans who came in and said, we're shutting down that border because we can't handle it anymore. So that's the difference. You have ideologies, but we can't be naive here. Money's involved.
Absolutely.
If you're a Republican, you get X number of dollars from the Republican Party. If you're a Democrat and they don't like you, they cut off the funding for your election. It's all about getting elected and then getting reelected. They walk in the door and their next concern is...
And that's how you have people in there for 40 plus years.
That's right. That's right.
What was I going to say? I'm going to take it a step back. I said the two sides, but working against each other. Mm-hmm. That's what I meant, though. I don't like the idea, and the way it should be, is you're supposed to be working together, not against each other, right? You're in it for America, but as our past president said, we're not working as one unit anymore.
No.
Right? And that's kind of the depressing part of politics now.
Yes, because we're seeing the main characters, we'll call them. Are they really working for America? Or are they working for themselves?
Yes.
Okay? That's the question.
So Brendan Schaub on The Fighter and the Kid said it best the other day. Nancy Pelosi has a better trading portfolio, I guess is the right word, like the ability to see trades coming up, than the top people on Wall Street. It doesn't make sense how much money that lady makes unless you're doing serious inside trading. And she's one of those people, how if you look at the track record she has, of course she's insider trading. Like there's all the evidence is there, but they can't go after her because she has too much power.
Well,
that's
it's
the perfect
not her.
example.
It's her husband that does it.
Yeah, she goes through him.
Right.
It's a perfect system, but it's so blatantly obvious that there's something more. No one hits 100%, right? And she's pretty damn near 100%. So that's what I mean. To your point, these people have been in there for 40 years, know how to work the system, have made all the friends they need to get away with murder at this point. That's why I said once you get those people who have been out who have been in for 40 years, once they're all gone, you're going to see some drastic changes. I don't know if it'll fix everything, but you will at least have new minds involved.
Fresh blood. Fresh ideas, fresh blood. It's a young country. But also keep in mind, that's why they vilified MAGA candidates.
Exactly.
It's not because they're pro-Trump. It's because of what, and I've been saying this, MAGA came before Trump. Yeah. Trump wants to take credit for it, but it was here with the Tea Party. That started with the people looking at taxes and saying, what am I paying for? So now you see, for all the people out there saying, oh, well, I keep saying the MAGA people are so bad, so bad. Listen to what they're saying. They're not bad. What they're saying is what most people in this country have always wanted. Close the border.
Yeah. Remember, immigrants are the ones that want that border closed, not the white Americans as much.
Well, not immigrants, but you're like
people who have come here. Yeah, legal immigrants. Yeah.
Because they have to bear the brunt of it. But the irony is, Chris, when you look at campaigns over the years, whether it's a state representative or presidential, the people that always win are the ones who are pro-close the border, pro-border, I call it. Donald Trump had an entire platform. That was the first thing he said. We're going to close that border. Yep. And many people have said, and I don't necessarily disagree with this, he didn't get reelected because he didn't do it. That was the one thing the American people always want as a majority, to shut down the border. They promise it. Remember we said they'll never do it because they fundraise off it. But
even though they just did it. They finished this wall.
Well,
good job.
They did a portion of it. But, Carrie Lake, the governor in Arizona, the number one thing she says from day one is, if a day I become governor, we're going to shut down that border in Arizona. Mm-hmm. She is winning. She's going to win.
Dominating. Yeah.
I have a feeling she's going to do it.
Yeah.
She's going to do it in Arizona.
The other, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about towards the beginning of the podcast, I think a lot of the reason why our past president couldn't finish the wall was because you have to pass so many things through so many people to get that wall finished. So even though you have this idea, it still has to go through a lot of people to get it done.
Believe it or not, there's ways to do it. Department of Defense, he could have done it. He had an opportunity at the beginning, but instead he decided to fund our military, which a lot of conservatives, we were all upset about that because we wanted that wall. And unfortunately, billions of dollars of our equipment that we paid for and gave up a wall over is now in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Okay?
Or Ukraine.
Or Ukraine. Well, now he's shipping to Ukraine, but Afghanistan was just left there. So
that's right. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
It was a disaster on many levels. But I can't tell you how many times. Every time. And that was the one regret from Ronald Reagan in his presidency. He signed some immigration act that he knew at the time was... He just knew it wasn't going to be good for our country, opening up the border through some legislation. Yeah. And that's somebody, to your point, he was thinking ahead, and he said that was my one regret because he saw it was going to happen. And here we are today.
Yeah, he was completely right. This is why Reagan's known as one of the, was it most liked presidents? Right? I forget which one it was.
He came into a mess, and he did not have, his first couple of years were a real mess. But he had a financial nightmare from Jimmy Carter.
And this was an actor, remember?
say what you want to, but he's a bright guy. He was the governor of California, and he spoke well, and he even Democrats liked him. You know, it was.
Right. I think he was the only president to win like every single state, and one was like questionable. And he said, "Listen, just give it to the guy."
No, because it was his home state, Walter Monson State. And he said, "You know what? Pull back, because let him have one."
Yeah.
You know, and that was his home state.
That's insane to think about.
I know. It's an amazing thing. Now, do I agree with everything Ronald Reagan did? Yes. No.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was young at the time.
It's if you were agreeing with Nixon, then we'd have some questions.
Yeah, no. Well, believe it or not, Nixon, I mean, we could have a whole discussion about that, but there's a lot of things that Nixon did right for this country at that time. He opened up our relationship with China.
He was definitely a harsher
It was
president.
taken into overdrive,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. He the best way to put it, I forget who said this to me once, but it might have been Papa. But Nixon, he was the closest thing to kind of ruling with an iron, like really pushing things forward in comparison to what most presidents would do for that time. Like obviously you would say, without throwing 50 executive orders out there. He did his fair share, but I think that's one of those things how he would rather take the shit for it for X amount of years he was in there and then realize 50 years later that it was the right decision for a lot of things. Not saying that is what happened, but I think that was somewhat of the mindset.
Well, his Secretary of State at the time was Henry Kissinger. And a lot of people thought very highly of Henry Kissinger in the time what he did, and he was the architect of a lot of things with our foreign policy that resonate to today. But now we've learned things about Henry Kissinger that I'm not so crazy about. Now, I was a little girl at the time.
You can say that about anyone, though.
That's true, but he was, and I'm not. I mean about his policies and his ideology that you never would have known at the time when he was working with Nixon. Having said that, I mean, it's funny because I was talking with Michael when he was in high school here, and when all this stuff was going on with Russiagate, Russia, all that stuff, and he asked me, what was Watergate? Because it came up when they were comparing this to Watergate. It's worse than Watergate. And I told him what Watergate was, which was why Nixon resigned. And he goes, that's it? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, see how really messed up even our problems.
Well, that stuff was unheard of. Watergate was just, if I remember right, that was the bugging, right? They bugged the...
it was a break-in in the Democratic campaign office at the Watergate Hotel. And the question became, who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew about
and they
it?
said
How
that
high up
they thought
did it go?
Nixon was the one that bugged the... Yeah, so for people that don't know... Yeah. So for people that don't know, if you're too young, Watergate was basically the Democratic Party was having a meeting and there was tape recorders, secret tape recorders or whatever technology they had back then.
No, that's not what it is.
Really?
It was the Democratic campaign office in the Watergate Hotel. The Republicans broke in to steal whatever, information about the campaign, whatever, okay? A security guard discovered it. So it was a break-in, investigated, and everything else.
Which one am I thinking of then where there was there was a meeting going on and I know the Republicans did it, bugged the meeting, so like there's recordings or whatever, like someone was recording something when it wasn't supposed to be.
President Nixon recorded his discussions in the Oval Office when his people would come in.
Yeah.
And kept a recording. I think all presidents do still. And it became, who knew about this? Right. How high up did this go? The conspiracy theory. Did the president know? And then it became an issue of, we want to hear the tapes, because they had a special committee and everything else.
Oh, okay, so I'm not, I have half of it right.
Yeah, you're close. But
I'm close.
They wanted those tapes because they wanted to get Nixon. They wanted to get him out. And he refused to give them, and then ultimately he resigned because he knew it was going to come out.
It wasn't impeachment, it was just a resign. Right?
They were going to impeach him and remove him from office, but he resigned, and Ford took over.
Which kind of goes to show that he was doing something wrong. But
well, he probably didn't know about it, Like, we now have information that President Obama knew about Russia, and the dossier and everything else. But will anything be done about it? No, he's already out of office, and, do people care? I don't know.
There's no point. Yeah, it's too late.
Well, there should always be a point when people break laws, that's another thing, big picture, that we have a problem
let me
with
ask you
country.
Then, if we find out 5 years from now, so after, I guess it would have to be 5 years from now, if all the Hunter Biden stuff is true, and again, not saying it is, I'm just saying, if all that's true, do you even bother going after Biden on that one?
Well, years from now, Biden won't be around.
You're right, that's what I mean.
Father Biden won't be around. They will be going after Hunter Biden after the midterms. I think that that's going to be a special counsel because you can't let that slide. We could potentially have a compromised president.
Yes. Which
that's
would
a
be
problem.
That's a real deal. Like that's not
Yes.
even joking around. Like that could be a huge factor in the midterms. So that's why you see a lot of the Democrats pushing things like really hard, like more marketing than you've ever seen.
Yeah, they cringe when they heard about this laptop. But having said that, and this is a perfect example. Normally, I could care less if a senator has a messed up kid with a lot of emotional problems.
Yeah, every family has its issues.
Right. I'm not crazy about a president having it because, we do kind of hold the first family to a higher standard.
Yeah.
I don't think that's asking too much. If somebody got over demons, that's a different story. But once you have evidence on these things of the president being compromised by his son or associates or whatever, now you've got a problem. That's a security
because now it's affecting
issue.
Yes.
Right.
Gotcha. All right. We just did an hour and 7 on politics. So
Yeah.
you want to do a hedge fund giant? Elliott warns looming hyperinflation.
Oh, I know. This is another depressing one. But Elliott Management Group, so these giant hedge funds, they're telling you that they see the worst financial crisis coming since World War II. That investors should not assume they've seen everything when it comes to a collapse. So they're trying to compare it to all the things we've had over the last few years. You ain't going to see anything like that with what's coming.
Yeah.
Period of cheap money. Okay, so their point is we could have hyperinflation. So we have inflation now. That inflation could go into overdrive in the sense that everyone would say, well, supply chain and COVID. The only thing that COVID did about it was we printed a lot of money, and we've had a lot of cheap money. And I think your listeners should be aware of the fact that we could see some pretty nasty times ahead as they adjust the value of things because they've just you can't keep printing money and think it's going to hold its value, right?
Do you think midterm elections are going to help that a lot in the sense of bringing the inflation down? Because they're probably going to stop giving money to Ukraine.
Here's the thing, and this is the part that we've known for a while now, regardless of the midterms. Yes, it's going to help. It can't hurt. It's going to help. But this has been going on for so long that it's more of a banking issue in our country with the Fed,
people
the
talk
central
about
bank.
That a lot.
Yes.
The central bank. One of these days we have to do a whole podcast just on the central bank. We could do a 3-hour podcast on that.
Yeah.
When you really break down the central bank and how it works, and even my gaps in the central bank are there. That's one of those, that Destiny guy that we talked about. He does a very good job explaining how the central and national bank work. But yeah, I don't know enough, but that's one of those things how that's a problem and something has to be done about how the central banking works.
Yes.
And that's one of those things where that might be an area where even that could be a too far gone sort of situation where you might not be able to do anything about it at this point.
Right.
So
what you don't do is you don't sign an executive order doing a digital currency and putting it in the hands of the central bank.
Yeah, very good point.
Okay. That's your definition of communism.
Yeah.
That's how
you're
take
giving
down
the
countries.
central bank even more power than they should have right now.
Right. Which is the exact opposite of what a democracy is. And that's why Alexander Hamilton and, now I can't remember who the other guy was it Madison? Argued about, maybe it was Jefferson, argued about, do we need a federal bank? One said no, that's a disaster, and the other one
and then
pushed
they shot
for
each
it.
other, right? They shot at each other.
No,
was that what the
him,
duels
that
over?
was Aaron Burr.
Yeah,
was
that's right.
Burr.
That's right. I know, I'm kidding, but
yeah, but that's been an argument in our country forever.
That's the famous. That's the famous picture of the. It's a Senate and one guy's getting held back. Right, you know that one? It's in like every history book.
Oh, I don't think that was Hamilton Burr.
I believe
was it.
No. The one you're talking about over the banking.
Over the banking.
I believe they're both being held back by people. It's a painting.
Well, but look again for people who mock them. Oh, they old slaves. These are pretty bright men. That's
back then, yeah.
You're
talking about
the future.
Imagine having 12 Elon Musks in one room. That's kind of what it was.
It's a scary thought.
For that time.
But to have that sort of forethought. And
that's really it.
That's
what people forget about. It's not how smart they were. Again, they were super bright people, no question about it. But they had the forethought to think 100, 200 years in the future.
Right.
The fact that our Constitution, for the most part, has held up through the changes of cell phones, literally cars, right? Train lines. It's amazing how far.
And the issue is, if you want to preserve this country, We have to go back to the Constitution. That's the problem. We keep deviating from it. Back to what we were saying. Well, it's incredible that the states think they have the right to run an election. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. And they do that because that's closest to the people.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
the people should decide. Well, we can't decide on a federal level because that's too massive in too many states. So let them pick their representatives in the state who will then decide the federal election. That's how you keep it in the hands of the people.
I like how everything we say just keeps going back to midterms.
Back to the midterms.
It keeps going back to
But,
midterms.
you know,
Hyperinflation.
this is important because this is your money.
It's affected by our politicians. So
right, and
that's a
even
huge
just if
factor.
enough of your podcasters know now that there's an executive order floating out there, and I think more people need to know about it. And it scares me because your generation tends to be very, and younger tends to be very pro-digital. Everything digital is great. Digital, digital, digital.
Not when you don't understand, or not when you understand how money works.
Right, and your dad, it took forever for me to get him to use credit cards. He was a cash guy his whole life. He wanted everything cash because he didn't want things hanging over his head when he was young, which is admirable.
Yeah.
But a lot of older than dad, obviously, they're not comfortable with not having cash at all.
Oh yeah.
They don't do pay with the phone.
I remember PJ used to. Whenever we go somewhere, I was like, "You have any cash on you?" He's like, "No, I only use credit card." He would never even have money on him, and it did make sense to me.
Right.
I used to go to the ATM just to take out money for the. What?
Sorry.
Yeah, just want to make sure that we didn't hit the mic again, but
Oh, my hip on my
that's a.
Apple Pay
yeah.
and Tap to Pay and all this stuff.
It doesn't make sense to have I never used to. Within the last couple of years, I'm better about it. But I used to go to the ATM to get money. I would never use credit card.
Yeah.
Now everything I buy is pretty much online. But
Well, Dad had a problem with his. He doesn't mind me saying this. He had problems with his ATM at our bank one day. For some reason, there was a glitch, and Dad never goes because I'm usually the one who gets money, and if she says you have an extra, I give an extra. And he was so mad. He said to them, "Okay, they gave him like some sort of story about how we have a problem and we'll let you know or whatever." He goes, "No, you're gonna give me my money right now, or I'm pulling every dime out of this bank before I walk out." And they worked on it. And they fixed his card for him, which I'm like, good. What is that? That's your money.
yeah,
But that's a taste of what it's like, people.
imagine if they couldn't get. Yeah, imagine
right.
if you needed money right now, like for some reason, God forbid.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yes.
So, but it's those little things that people are like, it's 10, 15 minutes. Still your money. Like
No, but my point is that's a taste of what it's like when, for some reason, you don't toe the line. They contact the bank. Let's put a hold on Joe Schmo's account because
I don't like what he said.
I don't like what he said, or he's a racist because of his comments, or I don't know.
That's when it gets scary, and that's the forethought that people don't think about, especially tends to be, not to belittle them, but a lot of people on the left tend to think that way, unfortunately.
Well, I
That's
don't think
kind
it's
of
the
mindset.
left. I think it's young people.
Well, I have
they
friends
love the
that
digital
are
world.
older that are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They think digital's easy. They don't want to deal with money. They don't have to count. Count?
Yeah.
They don't want to count.
But
And it's just much easier.
I told you about. Sprague won't care if I say this, but Sprague and Nuds used to do this thing where they would use their credit card and only pay the minimum. And the idea was,
oh my gosh,
I hate this.
You
yeah,
know my thinking.
Yeah, so I always pay mine full. I never pay the minimum. Again, obviously, you can't afford it, and you do it that way. But Matt could afford at the time to just pay off his credit card. He and Nuds thought, for some reason, Nuds convinced Matt. I'll give him that. That all we had to do.
Change the names to protect.
No, they don't care. Matt doesn't give a shit. But they would pay the minimum on their credit card, thinking one day they'll never have to pay it back, until the day they die. So they were like, "Yeah, we have all this free money so it would reset the credit."
Gosh.
And their credit score was they couldn't do anything. Yeah,
Two.
yeah,
Two.
like that's what I mean though. Like the people don't understand how the digital aspect of money works in the sense of, it's digital, but there's still real money behind it that you have to pay.
Right.
So, don't ever do what, even Matt will tell you, don't do that. Bad idea.
My gravestone is going to say, Kenny, don't pay the minimum.
Oh,
Michael,
man,
don't ever pay the minimum.
Please.
Not that
Just
he
pay
ever
it
does,
up.
but that's
Again,
what
don't
I
get us
agree
wrong.
that
If
in all of
yours-
you guys, Christopher,
yeah.
don't pay the. You never just pay the money
Yes.
when you first got your credit card. It's like you never just pay the minimum.
Again, for those of you that can't afford or something else is going on, if the minimum is all you can pay, of course do it. Like, don't skip the bill,
Right.
but make sure that you pay off your credit card.
Well, and mind you, this is a problem right now. Back to this article that I was talking about. Because of inflation, a lot of families are putting expenses on credit cards.
Yes.
And that's why they're voting red, because they want that to change. because they know interest rates went up again last week. I think we're moving into double digits for credit cards.
Oof.
These people don't have it to pay it back. That's a crime, in my opinion, in the United States of America, that we're making the middle class poor. And that's the primary driver of our economy, the middle class. Yeah, you got your elites, wealthy people, and they'll always be there. But they're not the major fundraisers of our country or funding of our country. And you have poor people, they tend to take from the country, in theory, to get on their feet, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So the middle class...
If you do it the proper way and use what it's designed.
Right.
I think a lot of people, I would even argue that most people at that point, to get by, will actually abuse that system.
Yeah.
Because they can get a little more out of it. It's almost, I used to, when I was younger, I would blame those people for taking
advantage. What do you mean? You're talking about the people who take
food
it from the country?
stamps,
Oh,
whatever.
that,
yeah,
okay.
that kind
That's
of
with the middle class with the credit cards.
No,
choice.
Paul, yeah. I mean, I used to think that was, like, those people were bad people for abusing the system, getting more stamps. And, of course, you shouldn't do it. But when you're impoverished and you have to do stuff to sometimes keep your family afloat, it's kind of hard to be mad at them when the system's kind of easy. It's almost like it's made to be cheated. You see what I'm saying? Especially when it gets to that level of poverty.
Right. And in theory, the government is supposed to help you get back on your feet.
Exactly.
That's not what's happened. It's been used by, let's go back to the politicians. It's been used as a buying of people, buying of votes. They keep them on, they call it on the dole, on the government assistance. You keep people on that, and then you threaten, you're going to lose it if you vote for my candidate. He wants to cut you off from food stamps, or she wants to cut back on all your government assistance. So vote for me, and I'll keep you on that. Well, I'll make sure we fund extra so you'll get even more money so you don't have to go to work. That's not how it works, or how it was ever supposed to work. And there was a time in this country, like during the Great Depression, people were appalled to have to go on a soup line or have to take money from the government. But that's how bad it was. Now, there are generational people.
There are people that will make entire livelihoods just based on that. It's not about getting out anymore. It's about abusing that system until you can stay there.
It's generational. That's how they learn.
I remember when
that's the family business, if you will. When you get to a certain age, their daughter, start having kids. Every kid you have, you're going to get government assistance.
And then you put them under you, and then you would have that family that had, no exaggeration, 15 to 20 kids, and they would make like $3,000, like what was it, like $2,000 a month per kid, or not $2,000 a month, but like $500 per month per kid times the 20.
Right.
You just made more money than some people in the lower middle class.
Right. Plus they get free education, and now we're trying to do early start programs so the kids go in earlier.
And they get a lot of back on their taxes because a lot of it's unclaimed money.
If they even pay taxes, most of them don't even pay taxes, and they.
But I can't. That's what I mean, though. You can't really be mad at them because it's a system that. I mean, to a certain extent, you can be mad at them because you are abusing a system, but the system's almost too easy to game if you're able to kind of figure out the loop around. Right. So who do you blame there? I can't claim that I'd be any better.
No, I blame the parties, the government parties and the legislators that have promoted this for years. But I'm old enough. I know the times when it's usually conservative, usually Republican comes in and says, we have to rein in these programs. They get vilified for saying that. How dare you say that? He's going to starve people in the streets of New York. He's going to, little babies will get no health care. Well, to some extent, that is true, but that's not supposed to be the government's job to take over that care. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see a lot of, with broken families, father not in the house, no provider. That's become a cultural part of our country. And you're seeing a lot of our leaders now, again, they're getting MAGA, for instance, get the father back in the house. A woman should not be raising a family. You're guaranteed, I think the statistics are through the roof.
Okay, female Andrew Tate, calm down.
No, but I'm saying, a single woman, the statistics of her chances of being in poverty, a single mom, are ridiculous because of that fact, just because fathers are not in the house. So who takes over? The federal government becomes the father. You and I have to subsidize that choice that those people make because for whatever reason, it's not encouraged that fathers are in the home in certain communities. Now you throw in the whole drug culture, which is out of control. And that adds to all these
we're
people
going down.
on
We're going
government
down
assistance.
rabbit holes that
I know, and
we're not going to figure those out on the podcast, but in one podcast at least. But
no,
yeah,
but you're right. It's a vicious cycle that it was never supposed to be this way. And when you have people coming in, politicians who try and fix it, right now we've had some candidates who are saying we want to fix certain things, and we have to cut back and we have to rein it in because of these comments. We're going to have hyperinflation. Our financial system could really collapse in a sense that nobody's prepared for. Okay?
Yeah.
And having said that, the first thing Democrats will say is, oh, Republicans are going to have to go Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. They're going to cut that. Okay, that's least of the issues that we would start with in terms of what to do, because that's the elderly.
Yeah.
Right? And they paid into that system. You're paying into it now with your checks. I'm paying into it.
And remember, some people, when you're elderly, a lot of times now they're starting to take, like if you have any loans, they're starting to take it out of your Social Security.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
well,
again, that's a problem that's going to take many, many presidencies to fix, I think.
It will never be fixed, Chris. That's the problem. It'll never be fixed because they fundraise off of it. That's the whole platform of the Democratic Party. Government assistance. That was their base.
Yeah.
Okay.
Planned Parenthood.
That things are shifting. The Hispanic vote is shifting. The minority vote is shifting in this particular midterm election. We'll see where it goes down the road. But when our last president had, and this is a fact, lowest unemployment rate for minorities in this country in the history of the country. Lowest unemployment rate for minorities in the history of our country. That's never happened before, okay? To turn around and say, well, he's racist. Lowest unemployment rate. That was the biggest thing in terms of attacking exactly what we're saying for minorities. Getting them off of government assistance. They got jobs. For the first time, ones who wanted to work, and the greatest number of them in this country were working. He also happened to fund more than any president, including a president who has a minority background, the universities. And he was a racist president. Those are the kind of things
African American
you do.
universities too. Remember?
Well,
that was the big one.
Right. Those are the kind of things that you do to uplift majority of people at that time. Now it's a mix of people that are on the dole. But that's how you bring people out of poverty. Give them the jobs. Right. Give them the education. But instead, that's not the policy of a lot of people. It's the opposite. Keep them stupid in school and keep them on the dole. That's how you control people.
Yeah. I have other articles, but I think...
Save them?
Yeah, I mean, we're already an hour 30 in, and I feel like we just keep going down the political road, so...
Well, I did have my story about the Christian monastery in...
Yeah, because...
United Arab Emirates.
Now, let me see that one.
It's in Sinaya Island off the coast.
I don't have that one.
It's 1,400 years old.
Oh, here it is.
Okay? And it's the second one they've detected. What's interesting is they think this might predate the time of Muhammad and Islam in Persia. And they think these monasteries went all the way, Christianity was stretching all the way on the coast of Persia, all the way to India. It's a hidden part of the history of that area. So they're unearthing it now, and they're identifying it literally as a monastery, meaning, there's a little altar area, there's a baptismal area.
Right.
So I think that's very interesting. I think people have always thought that that's been predominantly a Muslim area, but we do have evidence prior, probably to even Muhammad, who was the founder of the Muslim faith, that Christianity was in that area.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. I
just found it interesting.
Yeah, I, as I said, most of my stuff was political because, again, the midterms are coming up. But there was two big questions that people asked in Discord, if you're okay to go into the video game stuff real fast.
Yeah, sure.
So Views actually just asked, as we were doing the podcast, they asked me like an hour ago, which was better, Warzone 1 or Warzone 2? So Warzone, as you know, is the game that I play the most, especially with viewers. Warzone 2 doesn't come out for another week. But here's what I'll say. I think Warzone 1, Okay, so let me tell you what happens with Warzone, and we've talked about this last week with the problems of Call of Duty games coming out every year. What ends up happening is the first 3 months of Warzone coming out is always crap because that's the free to play part of the game.
Right.
So
then they fix the glitches, and then it gets better.
I think that's going to happen with Warzone 2, but I would say that for Warzone 1, as good as it was, there is still so many bugs that need to be ironed out 2 years later that I don't think they're going to make those same problems with the new Call of Duty. We've been playing, as I told you, we've been playing Call of Duty, the new one, for the last 2 weeks. And, it is probably the closest thing to, I would say military as any game we've ever had, except for an Arma. But I won't take you through what Arma is. But, it's the first Call of Duty that I feel like is actually not arcadey. Okay. Which isn't just run around and shoot things. Now, I play Invasion, which is a game mode where it's more of an army style rather than just people running around and shooting each other. Mainly because I can level up guns that way for Warzone. But as I was saying, I think Warzone 2, again, I'm speculating, but I think Warzone 2 is going to be a lot better. I think there's going to be a lot of bugs, as I said in the beginning. I bet you everyone's going to go back to Apex Legends or Fortnite for a couple months until all those bugs are patched and fixed, and then...
But what about God of War? I thought that's coming out.
Single player, though. That's next week. Oh. Yeah, we start that tomorrow, or the day this comes out, so that's a big one. But Warzone, the reason that people ask me this is because I'm one of the only... I wouldn't say only, but I'm one of the few streamers that'll play with their viewers. And since it's free, I have no problem playing with viewers. Here's my only problem with Warzone 2 as of right now. I like playing on the smaller maps with viewers because games are 15 minutes. Get them done quick.
Yeah.
Whereas, and if something happens, we could just start a new one. With big maps, some of those, and it's a bigger map than the last game, some of those can last 50 minutes to an hour. I don't like you guys that much.
Yeah, that's a long time to play with people.
It's tough because... when you have 50 people asking you to play, I can't play multiple games with one person for 2 hours and get 2 games in because that's not really fair. And then I can't get the other people in. One night of streaming on the smaller maps in Warzone 1, I can get 50 games in one stream. Right. And that I can only get 7 maybe in a night. So it's too hard.
But is it quality though? Are the 7 better games?
No, not at all. Not really. It's just time consuming. So until Warzone 2 adds a small map, like a mini map, a 50 player map rather than the 250, which they're going to have, Warzone's probably just going to be me and my friends playing rather than playing with viewers. We got to figure that out. That's. I talked to everyone about tackling that project, but we're going to figure something out a little differently than what we normally do. Can you work somebody into your group? That's what we're going to try and do. That's kind of the plan. We have ideas, but it's tough. I think until the bugs are fixed and they add a small map, which I'm sure they're going to do at some point, we're probably not going to be able to play with viewers as much as I would like to. But we will keep playing Warzone 1. I decided I'm not going to delete it, and then we can make that one of your podcasts? Remember you were trying to come up with things that you can win? Yeah, but I don't. One of the things I promised myself I would never do is I would never, for something like that, I would never make it like a paywall or something because then it becomes a little too complicated because too many people are asking. If it was videos, like if you want to do videos and stuff together for your YouTube channel or whatever, I'd consider it. But then you play the question of I'm not that big to do that, so it doesn't really help you at all. Right. But Chris, don't say that. It's tough. There's so many logistic issues that you have to figure out. But as I was saying, I think mechanically Warzone 2 is going to be better than Warzone 1. I can't say for sure, but that's the big question. You'd like to think if they're making another one that it gets better. You would like to think, Mother. It's Call of Duty. So the other question I had, and this was actually a good question because I was up pretty late thinking of this one, but someone asked me, what is the worst Call of Duty of all time? Okay, so let me take you through the Call of Duty real fast and how it works. Yeah. So ready? When I was younger, so when I was in high school, you had Modern Warfare 1, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3. So that's one group of games. Then you had Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, which is one. Then there's a Black Ops 4 that came later, but it's not really connected. It's not connected. Oh. I'm not saying it's very good. Then you had the one-offs, and the one-offs were Advanced Warfare, Infinite Warfare, World War II, There was a World at War back in the beginning, but I can't really put those in. I'm going to say the main franchises, which people consider to be the greatest games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
You have greatest Call of Duties. You have the Modern Warfare series, so 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Black Ops 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you had the 2 Modern Warfares again, so the remastered ones, which is Warzone. So Modern Warfare 1, which is, again, I don't know
Am I
why
supposed to
they do it.
write this down?
No, but I'm just giving you kind of the...
Test
I'm trying
yet.
to give you the scale because I got to tell you there's...
Oh, I remember them every Christmas.
Yeah.
I want Black Ops,
Yeah.
Mom.
So the ones that people consider to be the greatest of all time are Modern Warfare 2. Some people say Modern Warfare 1, the original, but here's my opinion. It's too old now to even consider it.
But you got to give it chops. It was the first
started
of its kind.
a precedent.
Give it its
was a
chops, yeah.
precedent.
Yeah.
So Modern Warfare 2 is in the running.
Mm-hmm.
Black Ops 2 for me, because Black Ops 2 is literally the one that made me the zombies player I am today, because most of my channel is zombies.
Of course.
Well, most of the viewership that I get is from zombies, so that kind of started it all.
Screaming girls.
Oh, that's Smash, yeah. Brittany, when we play horror games together. Anyway, the other ones that people consider the best, some people would put Modern Warfare 2019. Some people put Black Ops 4 in, which, I mean, I'll tell you why that's stupid in a second. And then this new one. People are saying that it's the greatest of all time, but I don't think there's enough information on it.
Okay.
The other two that they have as the worst would be... You asked me the worst, and the worst is not going to be the ones that people talk about, right? We all know that the worst ones are going to be like a Vanguard or whatever. But I'll say this. Of the ones that people consider the best. So Modern Warfare 2 had a fantastic campaign, great multiplayer, but that's really it. It really only had multiplayer, what's called Spec Ops, which is like co-op missions, but they're not like anything great. And then the campaign. Campaigns are always good.
Yeah.
So that one we could put as a good game, right?
So that's not the worst.
That's not the worst. It's a good game, right? Black Ops 2, in my opinion, is the greatest Call of Duty of all time. Reason being, the campaign is phenomenal, and it has replay value. So replay value means you could play it multiple times, get all the achievements. When I was in high school, I'd probably put just 100 hours into the campaign alone, which is pretty unheard of. Most campaigns are not 100 hours, especially at that time, which is like 2012, I think that came out. But that had zombies in it.
What kind of fool tells his mother that?
I don't even know what I just said. That's how.
I mean, 100 hours in high school.
Oh yeah, but over time, so it's like over 2 years,
I know.
right?
Yes, yeah.
What is
In
that,
between studying for the SAT. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, that was freshman year, I think. Anyway,
Okay.
No, it couldn't have been sophomore year, but that also had zombies. So that's why Black Ops 2, in my opinion, is the greatest of all time, because you had a solid campaign, zombies was 10 out of 10, multiplayer was 10 out of 10.
Okay.
Right? Great maps, great everything. So that one will always be top of the food chain for me.
Okay.
Now, here is why. Modern Warfare, the newest one, so 2019, good game. Warzone's good, even though it has its bugs. Campaign, 7 out of 10. I don't remember it that well, so it wasn't that great.
Who wants the worst, though?
Yeah,
She wants
but
the worst.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And then, but I'm saying like how I rate these games, because all the big
They're
streamers.
all good, apparently.
This is what. Well, no,
There's
all
only
the
like
ones
three
that
that
I'm
you
not
haven't
talking
mentioned.
about
Yeah.
aren't good. Remember, there's like
Okay.
20 different Call of Duties. We're just talking about 4.
Okay.
Right, and I'm saying which is the worst that everyone loves for some reason. But
Oh.
the reason that I hate when streamers or the big streamers talk about this is because they only go by the multiplayer, because that's all they play. When I buy a game, you know me, I like my money's worth, so
I
I'm going to
know.
play all the parts.
Yes.
So the newest one, or like Modern Warfare 2019, great campaign, new mechanics, great multiplayer. Warzone, which has its bugs, its cheaters, get you, but at least it's there. Now, I hate when people say, and this is why I think Black Ops 4 is the worst Call of Duty of all time. This was a time when Fortnite was big, right? Huge.
Yeah.
So battle royales were the big thing. So they said, hey, you know the campaigns that you like? We're going to get rid of it. We're not even going to add a campaign. We're not going to do a campaign. So instead, we're going to give you something called Blackout, which is the original Warzone, which sucked. It sucked because, and I'll give them credit, because of it was the first battle royale that Call of Duty did. They've never done a battle royale before that, so it was kind of the precursor to Warzone, which is what I play all the time now.
Okay.
But it wasn't good. It had terrible hit rate. Balancing was terrible. I hear they fixed it, but it was so far later, after like 2 Call of Duties later, they were like, hey, we fixed it. So that sucked. And then the multiplayer was okay at best. So, and then they had zombies in there, and they tried to do a spin-off of what we've had for 10 years. And it wasn't that was bad, it just wasn't good. Right? And then people say there's another one called Vanguard, Call of Duty Vanguard, which was last year's Call of Duty. And everyone says, oh, well, that's the worst Call of Duty. And that's not, I strongly disagree with that because that campaign was phenomenal. Zombies was terrible, like literally a 0 out of 10.
Yeah.
Maybe a 1 out of 10 to be nice, but the multiplayer wasn't terrible.
Okay.
So that's why, yeah, it's bad, but to me, if I'm paying $60 for a game, there better be a good campaign, a good zombies or whatever, a good multiplayer. And with Black Ops 4, you didn't give me a campaign, so right then and there I'm mad. Multiplayer was okay. It wasn't bad. It was okay. Zombies, 4 out of 10, bad. And then I will your Blackout, so your Battle Royale, was okay. I'll give that a 6 at best. So that's why I think Black Ops 4 is the worst Call of Duty to ever be made.
Oof, we got there.
Cold War is another one that people go, oh, it's the worst. Cold War had a good campaign. In fact, I would say Cold War is one of the best campaigns we've had.
Yeah.
Multiplayer, decent. It's a lot of reskinned of maps that from when I was a kid, they actually remastered the maps, which was pretty cool.
Okay.
But multiplayer and zombies in there was probably like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. So I can't say that's the worst. So I can safely say, with all confidence, because you know I don't speak opinions, I speak facts.
This is a fact.
This is a fact. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is the worst mainstream Call of Duty to ever be made.
Okay. I was worried we weren't going to get there, Chris.
I wasn't sure either. I was starting to pass out a little bit halfway through that. The blood vessels in my head were like, what the we gotta go. But, yeah. So we just did an hour 30. Again, we had some other articles, but I think we've already gone through kind of the important stuff.
Yeah, I didn't have any more.
So,
yeah. Next time we meet, the midterms will be over. So
midterms will be
move
over.
on.
Yes. So this comes out on Monday.
Well, we say that. We don't know. Some of them will still be counting.
So this comes out. Oh, one announcement that I want to make. Kind of an announcement. So this comes out Monday. Elections are Tuesday. But for stream standpoint, God of War comes out. I mean, we'll be playing it tonight, the day this comes out. I'm going to do that as a full Let's Play because that's going to take us probably all week. So I'm probably going to do it as separate videos, like take the live stream, turn it into videos. So I probably won't be talking to chat that much just because I have to focus, really. So we're going to enjoy that one together. I apologize if I'm not talking to chat as much or if at all, just because I don't want spoilers. I don't want anything. If someone spoils something, I swear to God, you're banned. So, yeah, we'll probably do it that way. That's going to be our game for the week, which I'm hoping we can finish in a week. Got to download that tonight. Big deal. And, this is what I wanted to talk about, right? And sorry, this makes me so mad. One of the things that all these companies are doing now, I could close this. One of the things that all these companies do now, Mom, and pre-releases. So the game's coming out tomorrow or Monday, but they've released to all the streamers already and all like the big YouTubers a copy in advance.
Did you get one?
No, but you can.
Who do I gotta call, baby? Who do I gotta call?
The amount of people that have put full gameplay out and have spoiled it for people.
That's not right.
That's not right. I saw a clip. I saw a clip of a spoiler. I don't know who this is, and you better find out. You better pray to God I don't find you. But it's a clip of one of the characters in there that it ruined my day. I was pissed. So, hey, can we stop with the pre-releases, please? Especially for single-player games.
I think you need
big companies.
You need to contact the company and say these people need to be banned.
Well, even one of the developers was like, hey, why would you do this? We're the biggest game on the planet. Why would you do pre-releases and give all these spoilers? Now, I guarantee you just slashed
He's fired now.
That guy's a hero in my book.
He now works for Epic.
So, hey, if I see one more spoiler, I'm coming after you. So, yes, as I said, that's going to be the game that we play all week. Only thing that I have to promote besides that is I put out the Hero Nostalgia Friday. Speedrun on Sunday, which is probably Death of the Outsider. Probably Death of the Outsider will be tomorrow's speedrun. And then, is that right? Yeah, Death of the Outsider tomorrow. Sunday. Monday, as I said, is going to be the podcast. Mm-hmm. Make sure you go out and vote. Again, we're not swaying votes here. Just make sure you vote. That's what's important. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. So Wednesday's going to be a weird one because we have something to do on Tuesday and Monday. So I don't know what's going to happen with Wednesday, but we're going to try and get a huge zombies video out that Jason and I just recorded before this. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that one because you guys asked for this 2 years ago. So, yeah.
Finally in the can.
Yeah. So either way, we will end it there.
Okay.
Good job, Mother. Social media
Yes,
down
honey.
below, promo codes down below, stream links down below, Discord down below for more questions. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So
right.
hopefully you guys have a good week, and we will see you in the next one and at stream. So good job, Mom.